Now, I do want to write a letter to the creator of this meme, but before I do, I have to explain why I'm giving him this letter. And the letter I'm going to give him is the letter L. And I don't think he's going to have a choice but to take it, because I'm about to show why he has to take this L. Now, I know that the title of this video probably sounds like clickbait, but bear with me. Don't jump to conclusions just yet. Wait until the very end, or you're probably gonna misunderstand why I decided to title the video this. Today's meme is brought to us by the famous Friendly Atheist. It says, radical Muslims fly planes into buildings. Radical Christians kill abortion doctors, but radical atheists write books. Yeah, so let's get into it. All right, let's start with the word radical. So radical means relating to or affecting the fundamental nature of something, far-reaching or thorough. So this meme seems to be making the point that if we follow the most core or fundamental teachings or beliefs of our worldviews to their extremes, this should lead Muslims to fly planes into buildings, Christians to kill abortion doctors, or atheists to write books. So given that, let's take a look at 3 ways that we can try to make sense of this seemingly bizarre statement. All right, let's go. Let's start with Islam. Do the fundamental beliefs or teachings of Islam lead Muslims to be violent? Islam was founded by a man named Muhammad who lived in the 6th and the 7th century. All Muslims believe that Muhammad was a prophet and that God revealed the Quran to him as a revelation from God. In the Quran, in chapter 33, verse 21, it says that Muhammad's pattern of conduct is the example that was set for all whose hope is in Allah. So in other words, Muhammad set the example for how Muslims should be. Although there are times when Muhammad called for peace, it's clear when you're reading the sources of Muhammad's life that he was absolutely not against violence and engaged in war and violence throughout his later life until his death. In the Hadiths, there's so many examples of Muhammad killing people who left Islam that all of the major schools of Sunni and Shia Islam believe in the law of apostasy, which means they kill people who become apostates, although they might differ in details and circumstances. So is violence committed by Muslims related to the fundamental nature of Islam? If the foundation of Islam is to accept the Quran, which says that Muhammad was the example of how we should live, and the life of Muhammad found in the Muslim sources says that Muhammad was for violence in certain situations, then we arrive at fundamental teachings and beliefs that, at least in some situations, violence is promoted in Islam. So given this, we can conclude that some violence done in the name of Allah is consistent with the foundational teachings and beliefs of Islam. Now, what about Christianity? Do the foundational beliefs or teachings of Christianity lead Christians to be violent? Christianity was founded by the person named Jesus Christ in the 1st century. Christians believe that Jesus was perfect and also a person that we should ascribe to be more like. He's the perfect example of how Christians should live. So, what about Jesus and violence? If you've ever read the New Testament, towards the end of Jesus' life, 2 authorities came to arrest Jesus, and Peter pulls out his sword to attack them. And what does Jesus say? Yo, that's my boy, get him, Pete. Peter, point your sword away. Now, take mine. It's much bigger, much sharper, and perfect for killing the Sanhedrin. No, I'm just kidding, he doesn't say that, obviously. Instead, he said, point your sword away, because those who live by the sword die by the sword. All through Jesus' ministry, he told his followers to pray for those who persecute him and to love their enemies. He modeled this behavior when he was arrested, and as he was being beaten to death, he still prayed for his enemies and for the Father to forgive them as he was being killed. In fact, there are no teachings of Jesus encouraging people to be violent. Now, I know that some Muslims like to point to Luke 19:27, where they say that Jesus is commanding his followers to go get his enemies and to kill them in front of him. But what they don't tell you is that this verse is actually from a parable. It's from a story that Jesus was telling. He wasn't actually commanding his followers to go kill people. Now, what about atheism? Do the fundamental beliefs and teachings of atheism lead atheists to write books? Now, some atheists who are notorious for claiming that they don't have a burden of proof to show that God does not exist, claim that atheism just means a lack of belief in God. And if we accept that definition, that means that babies and brain-dead people and doorknobs are all atheists. If this is the definition of atheism that atheists want to use, then obviously atheism has no foundation or core beliefs or teachings, because doorknobs and brain-dead people can't think but are still atheists. Atheism, not good for your mind because no thinking is required. So in this definition, writing books couldn't possibly be a consequence of the core and fundamental beliefs and teachings of atheism, because there aren't any. However, if the atheist doesn't avoid the burden of proof like the Black Plague, and takes the classical definition of atheism, then the logic still doesn't follow, unfortunately. The classical definition of atheism refers to someone who believes that the statement, God does not exist, is a true statement. Now, I can't see how writing books has anything to do with believing that God does not exist, especially given the obvious fact that people who believe God exists still can write books. Why imply that it's only Muslims who fly buildings into planes and it's only Christians who kill abortion doctors when it's not only atheists who write books? That seems like a pretty obvious category mistake. So the point of the meme can't be that the behaviors described in the meme are direct consequences of the foundational teachings of the worldview or the religious belief system. I'm sure this meme can't be that bad. Let's go ahead and give him the benefit of a doubt and take a look at the meme in another way. This meme may be better worded as, if a Muslim takes his worldview to its extreme and is violent, he's acting consistent with Islam. If a Christian takes his worldview to its extreme and is violent, he's acting consistent with Christianity. If an atheist takes his worldview to an extreme and writes books, he's acting consistent with atheism. Now kids, which one of these is not like the others? Why the seemingly arbitrary category for atheism, right? Now, a moment ago, we just talked about what can be said about Christians and Muslims acting violent in accord with the foundations of their worldview. But what about atheism? Let's ask the same question about atheism. If an atheist is violent, is he acting consistent with atheism? If we don't want to say that atheism is just a lack of belief in God, committing ourselves to believing that you can literally be as dumb as a brick and still be an atheist, then we have to say that atheism means belief that God does not exist. So what happens if we look at some super famous atheists who believe that God did not exist? Let's take a look. First, we have Joseph Stalin, whose atheistic and communist regime killed over 20 million people. Next, we have Chairman Mao, whose atheist and communist regime killed over 65 million people. And let's not forget Pol Pot, whose atheist and communist regime killed over 2 million people. Now, I know, some atheists are going to be saying, why did you mention some notorious killers who happen to be atheists instead of mentioning some famous atheists like some scientists or something like that, right? Well, the reason why is because doing science is compatible with any worldview that I'm aware of. And in this video, we're looking at the killing of innocent people, which is inconsistent with some worldviews like Christianity and Jainism and so on. Yo! To play fair, we need to consider if murdering innocent people is consistent with atheism on the second definition, the belief that God does not exist. So, is violence consistent with that view? Let's think about it. So if God exists, there's some things that are good and there's some things that are wrong that transcend our personal taste or what society says. If God does not exist, then killing innocent people for any reason that someone wishes can't really be wrong. We just come to believe that some things are wrong because our societies have conditioned us to believe that, or because it helped our ancestors survive in the past according to evolution. So when we think about societies, why couldn't it be that in these societies, it's okay to murder people in order to advance a communist regime? If morals only come from what societies decide, and if these societies decided that it's okay to murder people in order to advance communism and atheism, then we would have to agree that it was okay for them to murder innocent people. If so, and if God doesn't exist, then we'd have to say that murdering people in order to advance a regime is consistent with atheism. And in the case of evolution, we would be wired and programmed to feel that rape and murder are wrong, but that doesn't mean that they really are. We would only feel that way because it helped our ancestors survive. Think about it this way. The atheist might argue that the only reason that I feel like God exists is because this belief helped our ancestors survive, but God doesn't really exist in reality, right? And by that same logic, our morality evolved to make us feel like certain things are wrong, but these things aren't really wrong in reality. Now, if you compare these two arguments, I'm pretty much just saying to him, on your worldview, feeling like certain things are wrong is just a consequence of evolution. These things aren't really wrong in reality. And when it comes to him saying that I may feel that God exists, but he doesn't in reality, feeling that God exists, but he doesn't really exist doesn't follow from my worldview, but only his. So in other words, I'm taking his worldview to show him what follows from his worldview, and then he tries to take his worldview also to try to show me what's wrong with my worldview. Doesn't work like that. So this line of reasoning may be a problem for the atheist worldview, but not mine. Now, before we go, let's take a look at this meme in one more way. The only other way I can think to explain this meme is to conclude that we should judge the group by the minority of its members. We've already established how violence and killing can be consistent with the foundations of Islam, but violence and killing cannot be consistent with the foundations of Christianity. However, for argument's sake, we'll go ahead and grant that the violence described in the meme follows from each worldview, just as long as a minority of the members of the worldview committed such acts, all right? I'm feeling charitable today. So if we take this route, we can say because a few Muslims flew planes into buildings, that radical Muslims fly planes into buildings. And because a few Christians have killed abortion doctors, we can say that radical Christians kill abortion doctors. And because some atheists like Jeffrey Dahmer and some Chinese communists ate people because they believe that humans didn't have objective value, then we could also say that radical atheists eat people.
How about that?
And also, I would assume that some atheists would probably agree that eating people is okay on atheism.
Say what?
I'd assume that they may think something along the lines of, if we're nothing but animals and nothing more than animals and we eat other animals, then why is it too crazy of an idea to eat people, especially if those people are already dead and they won't suffer or feel pain? In nature, several other animals eat their own kind. What makes us think that we're any better than any other animals and that we should be an exception? Well, the very popular atheist and biologist Richard Dawkins may agree with me. He recently wrote, "What if human meat is grown? Could we overcome our taboo against cannibalism?" An interesting test case for consequentialist morality versus yuck reaction absolutism. Is it possible that the most famous atheist of our time, Richard Dawkins, agrees that cannibalism is just a social taboo? You tell me. So the next time you see a meme that says religion leads to violence, but atheism leads to writing books, instead of laughing until you pee yourself, what are you gonna say? What do you mean? Yo, what up guys? Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want to see something really dope, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and watch it go from red to gray. And then hit the bell because you know YouTube be tripping, all right? Once you're done with that, then go ahead and check out one of these videos right here.